everyone, and today we have some potentially scary stuff, as a major library used in most Linux distributions has been compromised and could lead to attackers taking remote control of your systems. We also have Redis ditching their free and open source label and thus being forked, and we have some good news about the future of Linux and what is being worked on. And we also have Canonical finally addressing the scam apps problem, and we also have this message from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by SquareX. They give you access to a suite of disposable tools that open everything in the cloud instead of locally, so your system and your data are never at risk. You get access to a burner browser that blocks all trackers and lets you change your location, and all your session data is deleted as soon as you close the window. You also get a disposable email address that you can use to create accounts or subscribe to newsletters, so you're not at risk from phishing and spam attacks. And you also get a disposable file viewer that lets you open files and view documents from senders you don't trust just yet, without risking your system. Nothing you open in there can access your real physical computer. You can get all of this by installing the free browser extension for any Chromium-based browser or using the web app. And if you use the extension, you get an extra benefit: malicious document detection. SquareX can identify potentially dangerous Microsoft Office documents that have malicious macros, and it can do so even before you open the file, straight from your webmail, with a little banner above the file that will inform you something isn't right. If you click the file, you will get the option to remove the macro, to convert the document into a secure PDF, or to view it as is through the disposable file viewer without risking your real operating system. All detection happens locally in your browser through the extension, and nothing is sent to any third-party service or server. This detection currently works with Gmail only, but it will be expanded to other services in the future. All you have to do to make use of that feature is to install the SquareX browser extension for free, so click the link in the description below and give SquareX a shot. It's an excellent tool to protect your local system and data. If you run a recent distro or a rolling release, you might want to check which version of the XZ library you're running, generally under the package libLZMA. The upstream releases have been infected and compromised since version 5.6.0, released a month ago, and they could let attackers interfere with authentication with SSH, letting a malicious actor gain access to your systems remotely. Among the affected distros, there's at least Fedora 41 and Fedora Rawhide, and it also apparently works in Debian Unstable. My guess would be that rolling releases that ship packages almost after they're released might also have the issue. So if you use anything Arch-based, it is best to check which version of libLZMA you have installed, if any. This is so bad that GitHub even preemptively disabled the repo for XZ for a violation of the terms of service, presumably the fact that it distributes malicious software. No fix has been issued yet, and discussions are ongoing to either fork that project, to stick to an older version and backport security fixes to it, or to move to an entire other compression system instead. At any rate, it is not a bad idea to check which version of libLZMA you have on your current distro if you have it installed. Not all distros that have version 5.6 or higher will be affected, because apparently a part of the attack was only in the release tarballs and not in the GitHub code, but depending on how your distro builds its packages, if they built it using the release archives, then your chances are that yes, you are infected. So Redis decided to switch to a source available license instead of the BSD3 clause license, thus ending its status as an open source or free software project, at least as defined by the Open Source Initiative, because the new licenses they picked place restrictions on what you can do with the source code. The Linux Foundation decided to provide an alternative in the form of a fork called Valky. It has the same purposes as Redis. It is an in-memory object storage solution that is used for caching, but also for a lot of other database-related use cases. Valky is based on the last version of Redis that was licensed under the BSD3 clause license, and it is backed by AWS, Google Cloud, Oracle, Ericsson, and more. And it will live under the umbrella of the Linux Foundation to provide a still open source alternative to Redis. Apparently, a lot of the contributors to Redis moved to working on Valky instead. Now, Redis said that moving to this source available license was to fight big cloud providers, such as the ones backing Valky, from shipping Redis to their users without paying anything. And their new license would mean that these providers just have to pay to deliver Redis to their customers after they agree to licensing terms. So basically the move here is to constrain those big cloud providers that ship Redis to their customers to pay something to Redis, which seems fair at a glance. The issue here is that the licenses that they pick are also restricting the freedoms of general users, because if you decided to fork Redis right now, you could never redistribute that fork to other people, you could just use it for yourself. I am not an expert in legalese and open source licenses, but from what I understand, the clause that would let you redistribute forks of Redis is also implying that you should have to redistribute all other code around Redis as the same license, which is fundamentally incompatible with basically every other free software license like the GPL. That means that you have to redistribute the code under the GPL. You cannot redistribute that code under the two licenses because they just do not have the same terms. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, this seems like a complicated topic. So to me, in the end, what it looks like is the usual, let's use open source volunteers and contributors to make our project bigger and better, and then let's do a 180 and try to monetize the hell out of this and ditch open source on the way. Now, there are some cool things coming to the Linux desktop. Christian Schaller, who is the lead for Fedora Workstation and Red Hat's desktop experiences in general, published an interesting post on what the Fedora team is working on. On Flatpaks first, they're trying to implement a way for applications that require access to system daemons to work properly, and this will of course go through systemd and a permission system. Toolbox, the project that lets you run distros in containers, is going to get full Nvidia proprietary drivers support, especially crucial to get CUDA support. The team is also working on Nova, a new open source kernel driver for recent Nvidia GPUs, which we'll talk about a bit later in the video. Plus, there's work being done on explicit sync, a feature useful to bring performance improvements for GPU-related tasks. And thanks to the team's work, Pipewire can now handle video properly, Remote Desktop can work properly on GNOME and Wayland, including logging into a new session instead of just remoting into an already logged in session, and finally they're also working on adding HDR support to Mutter, which is GNOME's compositor. And this is some pretty cool stuff happening here. It's basically bringing the little finishing touches to most little sticking points that the Linux desktop still has. The Wayland transition cannot be complete until we have the same experience as in X11, so they're working on that. Nvidia drivers have been a problem, so they're fixing how well they're implemented and writing a new open source one to avoid issues linked to the proprietary drivers. And app distribution on Linux has been its biggest weak point, and working on Flatpak to make sure that Flatpak apps can basically encompass every single application type out there is also pretty cool. Now let's talk about Ubuntu. The next LTS, which will release in about a month, will fix a problem that has apparently plagued a lot of people on Ubuntu. This problem being a pretty small virtual memory mapping limit. Most other distros like Fedora or OpenSUSE, and anything based on those, allow a lot of memory map areas per process. Ubuntu, though, stuck to the older value of 65,536, which is absolutely fine for a lot of programs, but for certain really demanding workflows, including gaming, not so much. This apparently resulted in some games crashing before they even opened, and some games crashing or showing degraded performance after a little playtime, like Hogwarts Legacy, Payday 2, Counter-Strike Go 2, or Star Citizen. Ubuntu 24.04 will multiply this max number by 16, which brings it to the same value that Fedora or Pop! OS use. This should also help with other software. I've seen people reporting issues when using Elasticsearch as well, for example, and the fix is to increase this virtual memory mapping limit. I'll admit I learned about this limitation while writing this video, and since I run an Ubuntu-based distro in the form of Tuxedo OS, I checked what my limitation was, and sure enough, it was the same as what Ubuntu currently has. I increased that limit to what Ubuntu is going to move towards, And it fixed my issues in Helldivers too. After an hour of playtime or so, my performance tanked from 60 FPS to 30 FPS, and by improving this limit, I don't have the issue anymore. Not sure if that's the fix or an update to the game, but it seems to have an effect, so good. Now, after the recent influx of malicious snaps on the Snap Store, notably fake crypto wallets, Canonical decided to change how one can register a new Snap app on the store. Manual reviews will be required for every new application. So the actual workflow is, you enter the name of your Snap app and a description. Then you upload the snap itself, and it is reviewed by an actual human, who will check the information provided or contact you for more details. If everything seems legit, the snap will be published. If not, well, it won't. Canonical's aim is to review snaps in 2 business days, and they also specifically mentioned that if the snap is crypto wallet related, it will automatically be rejected. So it looks like they're taking a stance against crypto apps for now in the Snap Store. Now, they also said that they would publish a specific policy for crypto apps and other sensitive snaps with guidelines for how to publish such an application. The crypto ban is a temporary thing. And it's really good to see Canonical finally reacting to the problem. You do not want your centralized app distribution platform to be associated with malware in the minds of users or developers, because if users don't use your platform because they're afraid they're gonna get scammed or hacked, then no developer will publish and then your platform just dies. And still on repos, Flathub is trying out new badges to let people know apps have not been verified or published by their original developers. Just like you can see verified blue ticks next to officially distributed apps, you will now be able to see unverified orange tags for apps that are community efforts, not from the original devs. It seems it's just a test for now, but I think it is a great idea, especially seeing as scam apps seem to proliferate on the Snap Store. At least people on Flathub will know when an application isn't 100% official, which for most apps won't really matter, but for certain app categories, like for example anything that might hold or request personal data, or anything related to money, for these categories it is invaluable. I am sure some people will think that it devaluates community packages, but in my opinion it is necessary as we move towards centralized app repos, and it is something distro packages should always have had as well. They are mostly all repackaging efforts, and it was never made clear to anyone not well versed in how Linux distros work that these packages were not coming from their original developers. And everything that informs the user is always good practice. It doesn't mean that an app distributed by their official developers is safe. See the first point of this video about the XZ library. And it doesn't mean that anything packaged by the community is unsafe, but at least it informs the user and they can make a decision. And if they trust the developer, then they can install the app. If they don't, then they have nothing to do here and they move along. And let's move on to the gaming news. Now, Red Hat announced they were working on a new Rust-based graphics driver for Nvidia GPUs to replace Nuvo. It is designed to work only with Nvidia GPUs that rely on the GSP, or GPU System Processor, meaning that it is mostly for recent Nvidia GPUs of the RTX series. And the goal is to use Rust as a language because it would apparently decrease the complexity of the code of the driver. They also say that making Nuvo evolve instead would require major reworks, so writing something new is not necessarily a lot more work, and they're only focusing on recent Nvidia GPUs because it just makes their job easier, and Nuvo already handles pre-RTX GPUs relatively well. The driver is of course open source, and they would like it to be upstreamed to the Linux kernel in the future, although the kernel will need to support Rust better before that happens. And NVK would also very likely work on top of that driver, meaning we would get a brand new stack for Nvidia GPUs, at least for recent models, with Nuvo still being around for older GPUs that Nova doesn't support. And that's a great thing. Nuvo does support GSP firmware requiring GPUs from Nvidia, but having a brand new driver with an architecture and code that is built specifically for recent Nvidia GPUs without the baggage of all the older architectures is just going to result in better performance. There's no doubt about this. So good effort, and I can't wait to see how it turns out. And to conclude, we have some relatively bad news for Linux gaming, at least for Battlefield 5 players, but also for any EA title. This game is getting EA anti-cheat in April. This solution is being rolled out to most current gen and a lot of older EA games as well. And of course, it has no support for Linux or the Steam Deck, meaning that these games will just not work on Linux anymore. EA anti-cheat is a kernel-level tool, meaning that it has no real way to run on Linux, and the company never expressed any interest for Linux either. And while Battlefield 5 is a relatively old game released in 2018, it's apparently still popular, and it is just the latest to get this anti-cheat solution, as EA seems to want to rely on this thing more and more. That's worrying because another very popular title, Apex Legends, comes from EA, and while it currently uses Easy Anti-Cheat, it could very well move to EA Anti-Cheat in the future, thus preventing Linux gamers from playing it. And I will never say it enough, anti-cheat solutions just suck. They don't really prevent cheating because they just catch up with the latest cheats that are being developed, and they are actually super invasive if you use them on Windows, especially if they're kernel-level tools, and they actively prevent us, Linux gamers, from playing certain titles. They're just a bad solution, and honestly, instead of pushing weird chatbot and generative AI, why not just use AI where it could be useful, in identifying problematic player behaviors and using that as an anti-cheat system, instead of forcing the installation of something completely broken that will just invade your system. Like, stop doing weird stuff with AI, do something useful for once. And yeah, this could be a use case, I think. And speaking of use cases, depending on yours, you might be interested in our sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. They make laptops, desktops, and NUCs that ship with Linux pre-installed. You can pick from a selection of popular distros, or you can just install your own, because Tuxedo does provide patches upstream to help support all their hardware, and if those patches haven't been accepted yet, they have PPAs and repos that you can add to popular distributions and their derivatives to add all of these fixes as well. So you know Linux will run well on those devices, compared to buying something from a Windows manufacturer, and you'll just have to pray that things are well supported, and you can never expect any fix out there. Tuxedo Computers has a big range of computers that should fit basically every need and every price point, whether you just need a small laptop for office work all the way up to a gaming tower or workstation, they have it all. I only use their devices these days. I have a laptop from them to run this channel, I have a desktop to run all my gaming needs using Holo ISO, and also all the devices are very customizable. You can open the laptops, repair them, upgrade them, you can change the keyboard layout by something custom, you can have your own logo engraved on the lid. There's just a lot of options. So if you want to run Linux and you need a new computer, and you want to support a company that actually supports Linux, click the link in the description below and get yourself a computer from Tuxedo. So, thanks for watching the video, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't hesitate to like, to subscribe, to turn on notifications, or to write a comment. These are all super helpful to the channel. And if you want to support it actively, there are plenty of links in the description below, which will give you a bunch of advantages and extra content. So thanks for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!